Hello, I'm Morgan Hightower.
And I'm Alex Jones. And as WBRC celebrates its 75th anniversary, we're taking a deep dive into some of the biggest stories across Alabama's history.
But this time we're hearing first accounts from the people who were on the scene, covering the news you remember the most. Welcome to WBRC 75, the stories that shaped our state. You probably remember exactly where you were on April 27th, 2011, one of the most devastating days in our state's history.
More than 250 people tragically lost their lives, while thousands more were injured. 62 tornadoes touched down across Alabama, leaving buildings and homes shattered and destroyed in its wake.
Meteorologists Wes Wyatt, JP Dice, and Fred Hunter were with you before, during, and after the storm.
All right, JP, we are talking to you about April 27th, 2011, a day I know that you remember very vividly. Talk a little bit about just the preparation beforehand, and I'm assuming you can't just know that it was going to be as severe as it was, obviously.
You know, I think we did.
Really?
I think we did. That was one of the things that I believe made it a little bit easier to forecast is the data did not have really any conflicting data. Everything supported a widespread tornado outbreak, one that we had never seen to that magnitude before. You looked at whatever model you chose that day, the parameters were off the charts, and they were off the charts days in advance. That's why if you went on YouTube now and you go back and you look at some of our previous weathercast, you hear us just talking about, hey, you need to prepare for this particular day because we have not seen data like this in really the history of any of us doing television weather.
And you said, Wes, when we spoke to Wes, he pointed out how the night before, and I went back to watch, and I know you post it every year on April 26th.
That's right.
And that you came out and said, there's going to be people who die tomorrow. That's how serious this is going to be. And before you did that, had you ever said anything like that on TV to predict the day before that it was going to be so bad people were going to lose their lives?
Never. I'm always careful to do that. I think sometimes in weather, you have to be careful that you don't oversell something, you don't exaggerate it, you don't make it worse than it is. And I think people knew that about me, that if I'm talking in those kind of terms, it must be something of great significance. I remember I got an email from a guy the previous day, and he said, I can't believe what you're saying on TV and what you're putting out on the internet. You're scaring people. And I sent him a note back, and I said, well, this is one particular case that you need to be concerned about, because this may be a situation when you have people do everything they're supposed to do and get to their safe place, and it still doesn't work out for them. Because we're looking at tornadoes that are going to be something that is going to be historic.
When you saw the storms rolling through, because you knew that it was going to be intense in a tornado outbreak. Was the track something, did you think it was going to be South Alabama or North Alabama, or were you fairly confident it was coming through?
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be a case where we're going to be just isolated to one area, okay. West or east or north. I thought, and I think I said the night before, this is going to be one of those setups where just about everybody is impacted by this. The surprise element in this was the morning storms. I thought there was going to be morning storms, but not to the severity. On any other particular day, what we had in the morning would have been a terrible severe weather day. We had a combination of tornadoes, and we had a derecho high wind event that came through, knocked the power out, lots of trees, and a lot of damage out there. And my concern was people would think, hey, they got the timing wrong and it just came in early and we're good for the rest of the day, or people would be without power and kind of disconnected on what's going on and not be able to watch TV and so forth. So what we had in the morning was pretty high magnitude, but what we had in the afternoon was 50 times worse than that, because then we had tornadoes that looked like something out of a movie. and it didn't even look real when I first saw those tower cam
If
images.
you have never paid attention to the weather before, pay attention to it now. Incredible storm, incredible day across the area. Wes?
Yeah, no doubt about it, JP. And as you mentioned, Forestdale, Arkadelphia Road right there, this thing is going to cross right over Arkadelphia Road, Highway 78. There are two areas, JP. We want to note that we had a report of a wall cloud. This back area.
I've got family in the path of it. My grandfather was right there near Rosedale, and I'm texting while I'm on TV, and by this point, not soon after, pieces of debris and insulation from Tuscaloosa start hitting the roof of this TV station. That's how tall that storm was. And we go to our tower camera, and you see shreds of insulation falling from the sky. And JP goes out back, and he brings in a piece of splintered wood. And I mean, talk about, just holding it up on TV, the power of that, and saying, look, this is falling outside of our television right now. He just went out and got a piece. There's no telling what's still back there in the kudzu here on Red Mountain. I mean, all that debris was falling, and that was coming from Tuscaloosa, parts of Jefferson County as that thing was moving in towards Pratt City. But, a lot of emotion, but for us, and you guys know this with respect to breaking news as well, when we have something going on, you're in the moment here. You're just trying to get that information out, and sometimes, I can't tell you how many times, and it's probably been like this for you guys, you look around and say, you know what, I've been here 2 hours, I can't believe it, because we've just been constantly, you get so immersed in just making sure folks get that information, and people say, a lot of times, how'd you do it? Well, we had no choice. We had to get this information out and for a lot of people, they were cleaning up from the morning rounds. I talked to one person in Tuscaloosa that was cleaning up debris and had no clue a tornado had just went through downtown. So there was so many uninformed, and something else that happened that day. And I know this from visiting Huntsville a couple days after. I had so many people walk up and say, we haven't had cell phone service in about a week.
Wow.
So the Beauregard tornado, they lost cell service during that. I mean, don't solely depend on one device.
Right.
I mean, and when it's a big time disaster like that, we're going to lose power, we're going to lose cell phones, we're going to lose a lot of things.
So, Wes, I want to ask you, because we doing weather coverage and breaking coverage with you, one of the things that's always important is you're really, really good at directing people to where to go specifically, like on our team. Like, okay, we need to cover this area, we need to go and see storm damage in this area. How do you, on that day specifically, how did you manage, like, okay, I have to send people to cover these areas so people know to be safe, but at the same time, these are people that you work with every day too. I want to make sure they're safe as well. Like, how do you kind of balance that, or how did you balance it on April 27th?
Well, we did some really good planning the day before, and we tried to have people pre-positioned to where they were near EMAs and places that had storm shelters. That's one thing we consider, and I can tell you, just countless events. Pickens County is always a county where we always seem to have a lot of active weather, right? As that those storms move in out of Mississippi, and we know where community storm shelters are. So typically, you'll see a lot of our reports near those community shelters, unless someone's in the storm tracker. And in that case, we do train. Whether it's a meteorologist, of course, had some storm training, but if it's a photographer driving the storm tracker, we try to often have the weather service here at the station do some storm spotter training, so we know where we want people to be in a safe position, not chasing storms, but spotting storms and south of storms. That day, you guys talked about Fred. We were worried, man. We were so worried, and that was the emergency operations center on Colusa Avenue in Tuscaloosa. It took a direct hit, and the pictures of it was destroyed.
Right now on this tornado, Fred Hunter on the phone. He's at EMA right now in Tuscaloosa. They took a direct hit. Fred, what can you tell us?
JP, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, great. JP, it was southwest of us, took a bit of a right-hand turn, and then just as I was speaking with Wes a second ago, and he was just a couple minutes ago anyway, we did take a direct hit. The roof is gone off the building now. Understand that the EOC is underneath of our vantage point right now. Because of the damage here, photojournalist Neil Posey and I are cut off from the rest of the building, and basically we're not able to get out right now, so we're kind of hung up for a moment inside the this end.
I mean, you've been forecasting these storms for decades, but to be in the middle of one, what was going through your mind?
Well, I'll tell you, you have these fleeting thoughts, and a scene setter here. I walked out back. I mean, the sky was getting dark, et cetera, and I had in my earpiece, of course, was listening to the broadcast from the TV station. I remember hearing Wes say, when they picked it up on radar, and they were getting a debris signature, and it was confirmed that this thing had already done damage in Mississippi. Well, I looked out the back door, and I could see it. And Wes is on the air saying this tornado is headed directly, and he's familiar with that area, of course, being from Tuscaloosa. He said it's headed directly for the Tuscaloosa Police Department, just giving people a perspective. Well, by the time he said that, I literally watched the storm turn. So if it had kept on its path, it would have gone through south parts of Tuscaloosa County, taken an entirely different, and gone through a less populated area as well. But I saw the storm turn. So I got Robert, who was producing that day, boothing that day. I said, Robert, I'm looking at the storm. I said, it has turned and it's headed right for downtown Tuscaloosa. And I'll never forget, Robert was kind of, you can imagine, Morgan, what the control room was like that day. And Alex has been in situations like that with breaking news and breaking weather as well. So it's chaotic at best. Well, this was chaos on steroids. So Robert said, probably not thinking about what he said, can I put you on hold? Well, I'm looking, Morgan, down the barrel of this tornado, literally at that point. And I said, Robert, you can put me on hold, but there is no guarantee I'm going to be here when you come back to me. And there were three other guys, and there was a set of stairs there, Morgan. And the guy grabbed me and he said, you need to get under here. This is getting back to your what was I thinking after forecasting and observing these things all these years. We got under those stairs, and the tornado literally was coming through the building. The thing I remember most vividly was the pain in your ears, because we were that close to the center of the storm, and you could feel the pressure change in your ears, and the dust. I mean, I closed my eyes as tightly as I could, and I was still getting dust out from under my eyelids 2 weeks later. So I remember that. And, of course, you remember the sound, and people say it sounds like a freight train, it sounds like a jet engine. I dispute that. It sounds like nothing you've ever heard on this earth. So I remember getting under those stairs, and if they still stood, I could take you and Alex down there and show you where four grown men hid under a set of stairs. And you'd go, there's no way four grown men got under there. But we did. And I mean, the storm was coming literally through the building, and I'm under a set of stairs, which I've told people to do hundreds of times on the air, and I remember having this glimmering thought, Morgan, my gosh, this really works. So thank goodness I have what the National Weather Service calls ground truth. Let me tell you, if you get under the stairs, it may save your life. So I'm convinced that it did mine that day, yes.
We haven't talked about, we talked about you being in the middle of the storm.
Yes.
You walking out, seeing the damage, but then the days that follow when you realize the impact of what this happened and how many people died.
Well, it took, honestly, there was so much damage that it took a while to process that. I remember first of all, I didn't just walk out, by the way. Yeah, and the fine men from the Tuscaloosa firefighters came and they pushed the wall over so that we could get out. And when they did, they pushed the wall over on my foot. So I broke my foot that day. So I was a friend of mine out there, and I knew him. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm saving you." And I said, "Well, don't bother. I was fine till you got here." So, those kinds of moments. But we finally were able to, someone came by that I knew from my church, and they were riding around and carrying people. Our truck was destroyed. There's still, I still got that backpack I had that day, and I think there's probably still some broken glass in the bottom of that backpack. I mean, the windows were all shattered, so forth. But so he gave us a ride because we knew that they were convening. You know, Mayor Maddox even said it. You know, one of the first things we lost was the Emergency Operations Center. So we lost our nerve center, you know, the first shot out of the gun. And so, but that night, eventually, after Mayor Maddox had been around and getting around, normally it takes me from downtown Tuscaloosa 20 minutes max to get back to my house. That night, it took me 5 hours. The roads were all blocked, and it was dark, and there's no electricity. And so we went to Mayor Maddox had a press conference there at the old City Hall, and we went there that night. And then it was over, and we did the live feeds. I think Sharia Harris was with me that night. And so we did the live feeds for the 9. Here's what Mayor Maddox had to say, and so forth. And I remember getting in the car, and just everywhere you went, if you went down River Road, if you went down 15th Street, of course that was impossible at that time because the storm had crossed 15th Street there at University Boulevard and gone on up to Alberta City. But the next morning we were back out there, and I finally made it home, and I was back out there, and I'm standing on the corner there, and Hardy McCollum, who's a longtime probate judge for Tuscaloosa County, and I have known one another for decades. And we're standing there, and I said, "Boy, this is a mess, isn't it, Hardy?" And we're standing right there at 15th and McFarland, normally a very busy intersection there where University Mall is. And Hardy said, "Oh, this isn't anything." Said, "You ought to see Alberta City." And so I went, "It's worse than this?" Because there was devastation everywhere you could see. But he said, then he paused and he said, "But Alberta City's not as bad as hoped." So the storm just intensified as it went through. Now, if you try to look for one little silver lining, or go, "Wow, it could have been worse." Here's how it could have been much, much worse. The storm came within, I must say, 150 yards of DCH, the main regional medical center. So it was that close. There, 15th, and I mean, you could sit at 15th and McFarland and see DCH right there, you know, block and a half away. So that's how close that storm came to hitting DCH.
You guys is incredible.
Okay, Dennis, we're going to get back to you. You be safe out there. We're going to get back to more of those pictures in just a little bit. And the reason we want to kind of just stop things here is because we still have these things on the ground, and potentially, you know, lives are being threatened here. So we're going to have to talk about not only Tuscaloosa County, but we have a couple of other storms that we're going to have to pay attention to. This is the one near.
In all your time in Alabama, you had never seen an EF4 or an EF5, correct? Visually,
yeah.
Okay. And had never seen the aftermath of storm damage like this.
Yeah, never. And usually the damage would be trees down in a neighborhood, 1 or 2 homes. When you actually see cities gone or parts of cities that are gone, and you start seeing pieces of wood driven into side of cars, that's a whole different level.
In a mile-wide storm.
Yeah. Mile wide, and you're talking about estimated winds anywhere from 170 to 190 mile per hour winds, and it's that big. It's coming in, it's like a bulldozer coming through a town.
I know that what do you think is the lasting impact of April 27th? I mean, you know, there's fearing storm anxiety now that a lot of people suffer with. Do you think people are taking storm warnings more seriously? It's been several years now since this happened. Are people forgetting? I mean, this is a kind of a thing you could never forget.
Yeah, I think certainly the people that were directly impacted do not forget and will always take the warning seriously. There is a lot of storm anxiety out there. We're in an area, we get a lot of thunderstorms. We get a lot of pretty active weather. Most of it, of course, is no more than some power outages and a few trees down, and everybody's okay. They may be inconvenienced. we don't get days like that, fortunately. I mean, those happen every 40 or 50 years. But I think we have certain folks, because of what they saw during that event, every time there's thunder, every time there's a mention of any kind of severe weather threat, their mind immediately goes back to April 27th, 2011, and they are just completely like, oh my gosh, it's going to be that again. They don't really have an in-between. It's either sunny or it's going to be terrible. So I think there is a lot of that. And I think you have a turnover in the population. You have people that weren't born then. You have people that are moved here from elsewhere. They're like, what's all the hoopla? You know, what's going on? Why is everybody getting excited about severe weather when they come from another place that may not get it?
You know, as journalists, it's so hard to remove yourself from a story. Yeah. Did you have a moment? It could have been days later, it could have been hours after being an inmate. Did you have a moment where you're like, you took off your news goggles and you were like, oh my gosh?
I still have it. You can go out, and I'll tell you where it happens. If you turn off University Boulevard going toward Hope, out Crescent Ridge Road, the first time I made that trip, I mean, you can literally see, to this day, if you know exactly where you're looking, so much of it's grown back, so many things have, come back, new houses and new businesses and so forth. But I remember driving out Crescent Ridge Road, yes, and I got a lump in my throat because I grew up, two of our daughters graduated from Holt High School. They were cheerleaders and band there, and I started out calling high school football games at Holt High School. So, my history with Holt goes back to the 70s. And I've driven out that road, 100,000 times. And that really hit me that, wow, this is what it did. And this area is never going to, it's not that it won't be better, but it's never going to be the same. And so I still can't really, time heals all wounds, they say. But if I take you out Crescent Ridge Road tomorrow, I'm going to be able to show you where that tornado came through, because I can still see it, and I can still see the way it was back then before April 27th. Yeah, it rearranged the topography and, frankly, the economy of Tuscaloosa. I tell people the two things that have contributed to the housing boom in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, was April 27th and some guy named Saban that showed up. and he made 15th Street and McFarland a little more crowded for a while.
We cover some stories that are just so heartbreaking, and you can't help. It's just like when you face loss, and you think about it and you start going down that rabbit hole. And when you think about what people's going through, but like I had mentioned, I had been through that in 2000, and there's no time like the first time. When you see that, when you go through that, and it happened around Christmas, and I just remember that the station I was working for at the time had an event like 2 days after, and I was just like, I just can't go to this. I just don't feel right. I just, something's not right. I just don't, you just have that sick feeling, that you have that knot in your stomach. When you go through something like that, and it's because you just feel for everybody. You know the pain everybody's going through, and you just want to help and do what you can. And I'll tell you something, everybody at this TV station, I was so proud of the news team and just everybody around. But look, not just here, everywhere in this community that stood up and helped on that day. But like I said, it's a generational event. There's certainly a lot of trauma after something like that. There's a lot of storm anxiety. I even today, if I say there's a threat of storms tomorrow, someone's going to ask me, is it going to be like April 27th? And even when I would go visit schools, if I mentioned tornado, it would upset a lot of children. So I have to be real conscious about stuff like that. And I know storm anxiety is a very real thing. And that's why I say take comfort in knowing that we're doing the worrying for you. We're tracking the storms. If we see anything, we're going to let you know. Don't worry. We're in the day and age. All you have to do is watch, and stay informed. We're going to be we watch it 24/7, and if we see anything like that, we've got some great technology. I don't think something like that's going to ever sneak up on us. We got some great technology, some great models. We got weather balloons going up every day, and the science continues to improve. In fact, we learned a lot from that event. Yeah, that's why, we're putting more cameras up. We're doing all we can to make sure we keep people most informed.
Thanks so much for listening to WBRC 75, the stories that shaped our state.
If you liked it, please subscribe, and you can always download these episodes on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or anywhere else you get your podcasts.
If you have any ideas for topics for this podcast, please email us at newstip@wbrc.com.